welcome to another edition of the BAT podcast. This is Randy Nonnenberg, co-founder of Bring a Trailer. I'm super excited for our guest today. Our guest today is Wayne Dempsey, founder of Pelican Parts, and also now with an enterprise called Dempsey Motorsports that he is launching, starting with his interesting collection of race cars. And he has obviously deep knowledge on all sorts of cars, but is an owner of a Porsche 959, and his user handle on BAT, I believe, is Wayne962. So you can maybe kind of guess what other kind of Porsches he's into. We are super happy to have him as part of the BAT community and also have him here on the podcast. Wayne, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Randy. I appreciate it. It's a really exciting time to be in the collector car business now. We've seen so much excitement from Bring a Trailer and all the other stuff. Everyone's stuck at home in COVID and just watching online. And it's really, really enthused, everybody, and excited everyone about the hobby. And, everyone's talking about the demise of the internal combustion engine due to electric cars and all this blah, 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 blah. But you guys have proven, and that's all kind of BS a little bit because there's so much excitement now. So heads up, hands up, thumbs up to you guys for doing a fantastic job. And I'm really excited to be talking to you. So
thank you. Well, whenever there's an interesting commenter on BAT, it kind of makes us perk up amongst the staff, right? And so we'll shoot some messages around. You'd be like, hey, did you see who's commenting on that car, or on that Ferrari, or on that pickup truck? Or do you see who bought that or is bidding on that? And your name came across, and you actually sign off in some of your handles with your proper name and a couple books you've written and your connection to Pelican. And I've known that you've existed for a long time because I've been a Pelican customer, owning old BMWs and Porsches and stuff for a long time and looking for a better way to buy parts. And obviously I kind of troll around and watch for 959s. 959s have always been near and dear to my heart. So when you started commenting in the red car that we currently have listed, when this podcast goes up, it'll either be on the day it's ending or right near it. You've just been kind of dropping anecdotes into that listing, which I mean, they've been getting a bunch of response from other commenters. And I actually just think it's super cool that you would do that and that you actually have hands-on experience with that car. So we want to talk to you about a couple things, but let's focus on, you have a black 959 that you procured in LA some way. So can you just kind of give us maybe a quick overview on that vehicle and we can talk about it a bit?
Oh yeah, sure. I love talking about this stuff because if I go to, dinners and parties at my kids' school and I start talking about this stuff to them, my wife kicks me under the table and tells me to shut up. So all this knowledge of 959 stuff is useless when you're at dinner parties and stuff like that. So, given the opportunity to yak on about it here is great, So I've always been excited about the 959. I'm an engineer by trade. I got 2 degrees from MIT from way back there. And, I always describe the 959 as being the ultimate supercar, which means, in German terms, I always said, when people come and visit my shop and I give them a little tour of the 959, I point to it and say, this is what happens when you lock 30 or so engineers in a room at Porsche and say, you have unlimited budget, and say, you design the best supercar you can. And they don't leave them alone for 2 years, and then they're 2 years behind schedule as well. But then they come out with a 959, which is every single gadget, every single technology, and every single idea that they can think of with no budget in mind, which is great because I don't think too many people do that anymore. So anyway, that's the backstory on the 959 and why it's so great. But my particular one, I was running Pelican for a long time, and for you guys don't know what Pelican is. Pelican Parts is a online Porsche, BMW, and Mercedes parts retailer on the internet. And our goal was to basically educate our consumers, and we have lots of tech articles, most of them that I've written or we've had authors write for us. Our goal is to educate the consumer and get them to be enthusiasts in the hobby and all that good stuff. Anyway, I did that for 20 years. And then we sold the company 4 years ago. But my point was, we didn't make money for 7 years. I was terrible at running business. So I just knew how cars and So finally we started to make some money. And I said, okay, well, what am I going to do? I had some cash in the bank. It wasn't that much because, just started. And this is back in like 08 or so. And my wife and we had bought a condo and we sold a condo like 3 years later. It's California real estate. We made, several $100,000 on the condo. And I was like, great, what can we buy? And my wife said, oh, we got to save it for a house. So I don't know how I convinced her, because this is like, 12, 13 years ago. But I said, you know what? Let's buy a car. We're living in a rental house in Torrance. And I saw this 959 for sale, and I thought they were undervalued at the time. So, and they were just a little bit more price-wise than a new 911 Turbo. And I thought that was insane, because I thought they were great cars. But they were in kind of what I call the supercar kind of valley, where it's too new to be collectible, although it was still getting collectible back then, and too old to be like competitive or whatever. And sorry, too new to be, no, too old. Anyway, you guys know what I mean. But anyway, so it was kind of ignored and not really paid attention to. So there was one for sale by Kalouian, a guy who is infamous now for his shenanigans with the Lamborghini of Orange County. You can go Google that. It's a fun story. But anyway, it was advertised for sale. And for like a year, and I kept looking at it in the ads and the Excellence, there's the whole ad and Excellence magazine and all that. And then I'm like, I had this money in my account. I'm like, okay, well, what do I do? So I called them up to see if the car was still for sale. It was like a year later. I'm like, yeah, it's for sale, but it's in storage. We got a lot of tire kickers who came out and looked at it. I'm like, okay. So, they said, wire us a $5,000 deposit. We'll pull it out of storage and do a PPI on it. So make a long story short, I dragged Tony Callis and Grant down there to do a PPI on it, and they loved it. But it was really funny because the guy who's the sales guy wouldn't let us go for a test drive without him. And Tony didn't want to go without Grant, and Grant didn't want to go without me. So we're driving down Sunset Boulevard or whatever in the 959 with four of us crammed in there, like this, tight in there, like driving along in this 959. It was like a clown car. So anyway, I remember that test drive. That was pretty funny, but it was awesome. So it was just awesome experiences. But so anyway, I bought the car. I remember I drove it home, put it in my driveway. My wife came out and she's like, oh my gosh. She's like, this is our house money sitting in the driveway of our rental. And I said, trust me, these will appreciate in value. They're not well appreciated right now. And that was one of the first times that I said, trust me. And I'm glad that it was, because that worked out okay.
Fantastic. And you're saying that was around 2007, 2008?
That was 2008, I think. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And so is this something that you've been able to drive? I mean, have you put many drive miles on it, or is it obviously it's sort of an investment item? Is it one of those that you sort of stash away, or what have you done with it?
Yeah, I didn't buy it as an investment, although I told my wife I did. But no, like right after we bought it, we took it to the track. So we're out at Willow Springs. I'm driving around with Jack Olson. He's giving me driving tips because I'm a car mechanic guy. I'm not the driver guy anyway. So we're driving up on the track there. I think we're on the streets of Willow, and something went wrong. We spun the whole thing on the track, and Jack is with me, and I'm like, what did I do wrong? He's like, I don't know. I was like, oh, that kind of happens. Went off road in it and all that. I'm like, okay, well, it's a 959. Just drove it off the road and drove it back onto the track and continued driving. So, back then, people were talking about me on the Pelican forums about how I was the only guy they ever seen who had a 959 on a track. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess so. No, and then just drove it like a regular car. I wasn't a daily driver or anything like that. I didn't want to pile on the miles. It was a high mileage car for a 959 too. It's got about 26,000 miles on it. So I don't really worry about driving it. So I remember I took it out to Fontana, to the races at Fontana, and I took my son with me, who was like 3. So we had the child seat in it and all that. I remember the news people came by and were looking at it, taking pictures of the child seat, and they thought it was the funniest thing, child seat in the 959. The nice thing about the 959 is it's a regular 911 on the inside. So very cozy, very comfortable. Just throw the kid seat in there, and we've gone out for ice cream in it and throw the kids in the back. It's the way it is, and the nice thing is having a bunch of miles on it means you can drive it and you can enjoy it. So, which is what it's meant to be. So
yeah. I actually, before I let you go further on that back to your when you purchased it. So I was in LA and I was in Westwood or wherever it is on Santa Monica Boulevard, and this is about that time, and a buddy of mine and I were stopped in our tracks because in a showroom window there was a black with silver wheel 959 I don't know if it had a for sale sign in it or if it was at a dealer. I don't recall, but it was in sort of a beautiful building and lights on, studio lighting on it and everything. And we obviously stopped and pulled over and like stared at the thing through the glass. And there was no Pelican sticker on the windshield yet, so it obviously wasn't yours yet. But I was always been wondering, because you're in SoCal and have this black car, if that was the car that I saw that one night, which is sort of a milestone night for a buddy of mine and I, that we saw this 959 totally randomly in LA. Was that probably the same car?
I would say the odds are yes. There weren't that many black ones, and there weren't that many ones in LA. And up there, it was. I got it when I went to go pick it up. It was in Beverly Hills, Lamborghini, in the showroom there. So,
I think I saw it like when it was being shown before you got it or before you took that test drive or whatever.
Probably 2000. Probably 2007, because they just got tired of everyone coming in and kicking the tires, and they stuffed it into storage after that. So
crazy. Anyway, that's totally amazing. I've always wondered if that was the same car. So, and then it got somewhat famous around because it was pretty stealth, but you still had a Pelican decal across the windshield that I think I may have seen it once or twice around or out. So you had it out and put some miles on it. So it's great that you actually add miles. What I think is interesting, and I told you this when I reached out to you to chat about it, is I just think that you're just sort of an owner that has it and uses it and has multi-year experience with it, right? When cars get valuable like this one is now, I mean, you hear so many stories of, some car being sold at an auction and it's been through 7 owners in the last 10 years and like nobody added any miles, or these crazy listings that we're doing now with vehicles with 20 factory miles on them that, just basically don't get driven at all. So hearing that yours is around, and actually people can go look at it. You said it's at the Peterson. Is that right? Is this car at the Peterson or has been?
Yeah, no, it's at the Peterson right now. And it's a great deal for me. I just wrote to Peterson yesterday and I said, you guys need any more cars? Because they give you a free parking and they pay for your insurance too. So I had 3 cars over there in the last 6 months or so. And now they're returning all 3 to me. So now I'm stacking up at home. This is what you call a first world problem, right? It's like, woe is me. My private jet has a flat tire. Oh, no, I feel bad complaining about that, but it is a real, So anyway, I'm trying to pitch them. I'm taking my fire engine right now, but they don't.
There you go.
They don't have room for it.
That's fantastic. So also, I mean, you come from the parts world, obviously, through Pelican and 959 parts and accessories and different sorts of things. That's been some of the discussion in the current listing. And you, I don't know how many 959 part numbers and stuff you could move through Pelican, or if that was ever even realistic. But are there any stories from the parts procurement world for your vehicle or from the 959 world? I know you also track a lot of these cars in the different bins and what's moving around and what's going on. I think that whole world is sort of fascinating. What's between your 2 ears on this model? I think people would love to hear about. So anything from the parts side or the for your car or experience that you have that you could share?
Sure. Well, one thing I want to say about Porsche, and give 2 thumbs up for Porsche, and the 911 owners in particular they enjoy a special place in the parts world. Porsche is really, really good at providing good support for their older cars. I've been shocked at what Porsche is still making for some of the older stuff. I've owned a few Ferraris, owned a few other oddball cars, and I can say tons of times it's just finding the parts is the hardest thing, and that's what people on eBay, searching ebay.it and in Italy and blah, 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 and trying to find stuff and getting VPNs because, eBay blocks people in the US. It doesn't show them all the stuff and all that. So you got to pretend like you're in Italy and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, but Porsche's done a great job of support. And actually for the 959, it's odd too. There's a lot of stuff that's still available for the 959. I think they kind of see it as one of their flagship cars, and it's a great marketing tool and all that, et cetera, et cetera. And they like to support the older cars. So the number one issue on the 959, there's a lot of issues, but the number one is the hydraulic accumulator system, which, the first time I saw a 959, it was out at the German Auto Fest. This was like in 2002 or something. Guy was driving around the parking lot, and then he just sat down, thing went raised up in the air, and then went back because it's got the same type of hydraulic lifting system that the old Citrons had. I'd never seen that before on a car. So that's great, except for the fact that it has these hydraulic accumulators, and there's like, how do you describe this? It's like this melon-sized. Well, actually, they use them on anti-lock brake systems in the old ones too. So they have smaller ridge, but these are really, really big ones, and they're a cylinder with a diaphragm in the middle, and they're welded on the outside with this rubber diaphragm in the middle, and you put, your air on the top, actually air on the bottom and hydraulic fluid on the top. And what it allows you to do is allows you to have a cushioning system, and then you pull hydraulic fluid in and fluid out, and it raises the car up and down. It's pretty cool. I think Citroen invented the system, or was the first to use it. But the problem is that, the cars as they get old, the diaphragms get old, and the rubber gets old and worn out and disintegrates. And then you get a leak between the top and the bottom of the diaphragm. And then the hydraulic fluid goes everywhere, and the car becomes like a clown car driving around, where it's bouncing up and down and up and down and up and down. It's the infamous 959 bounce. So I had that when we first bought the car. I didn't know anything about these things. So I'm like, okay, well, just figured, that's what it was. I was kind of stupid back then. But no, so realized that quickly soon after, that's not really good for driving and not really good for suspension. So we started to tackle that. And we tried to look to buy new ones from Porsche. I don't know if they were unavailable or they had them at $4,000 a piece. And, I'd spent a bunch of money on the car, but still didn't have a ton of money to spend on the parts. So figured maybe we could have some remade, blah, blah, blah. So we had one guy rebuild them. He had a bunch rebuilt, and he redid a new diaphragm and welded it. And he does something similar for Lexus. And we put that on a friend of mine's car, and it blew up and spewed fluid everywhere. So we ended up just biting the bullet and buying the new ones from Porsche. I think they were about, for a set of 4, I think it was about $15,000, $12,000 my cost. So yeah, but we went to the original manufacturer to see if they would make them. They said no, we only make them for Porsche. So we couldn't go around the back door for that. So but those accumulators, I have one. I don't think it's at home here, but that's probably the most interesting part on the car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fascinating. And that was only on the comfort versions, right? Was that on the sport versions as well, or they went to a different suspension on that?
Oh, you're going to challenge me on that one. I hate to say that something that's not correct, but I believe you're right. I believe the sport cars did not have the hydraulic lift suspension on that. So
anyway, interesting. Super interesting. So that bounce, we'll keep an eye out for that bounce. I've seen videos of it being, raised and lowered and that sort of thing. But that gets me to another question. So I had a what was it, 88 or 89, 911 Carrera with a G50 transmission in it, and dimensionally, obviously, there's a lot of shared parts there, right? And the interior and the side windows and different sorts of things. The core sort of sketch of the car is somewhat similar. Obviously, the technology in it and such departs so radically. So maybe a very novice sort of skeptic question to ask is, when you're sitting in the driver's seat of this thing, looking at the gauge cluster, going down Sunset Boulevard, like you're talking about, how different is that car to drive from a nice, same miles, really well put together mid-year 911? Talk about the differences. Obviously, there's the turbocharging, but
sure.
Talk about the other things that really grab you as being different.
That's funny you should mention that, because I borrowed a friend's car the other day, Kenny over at Auto Workstad. He was working on my wife's Mercedes, so he just said, "Here, take my 993 as a loaner." So I took it home for the day. And I was, it's been a long time since I've driven one of those cars. I was shocked at how similar it felt to the 959. The G50 transmission has the same clunkiness to it that the 959 has with its box. It's got a 6-speed kind of similar box, but it's way beefy. But the shifting feels the same. All the interior stuff is very similar from the same era. So I was like, man, what was missing was the power. And I actually called him up. I said, dude, I was like, might be wrong with your car. I don't remember the 993s being, this sluggish, and he's like, no, he had 3 of them. So I was like, yeah, no. You're driving that 959 too much. I'm like, okay, all right. Also, I have a Ferrari 360, which is this fast car. So that's a good car. It's a pain in the ass. It's now up on it spends more of its time up in the air than it does on the ground. But we can talk about that another time. But no, the 959, as I say, it drives just like a regular 911. It makes a lot of noise, a lot of weird noises. And in fact, I couldn't find it the other day when I posted the owner's manual. But in the owner's manual, it says something. It's a weird German translation, but it says something like, "This car makes a lot of noise. Don't worry about it." It literally says that in there. I'm like, okay.
What are you talking about? You're talking about suspension, or you're talking about just the gear, the drivetrain, and the all-wheel drive, and all that is just making vibrations and different noises, or what is it? What's it like?
All right, so the turbochargers sound like a 962 because it's a the Porsche 962, the car that won Le Mans and all that good stuff for many years. It sounds like that. You've got the blow-off valve, all that stuff going in the back. That's pretty cool. And then the four-wheel drive system in the front goes, like that, or whatever. It goes back and forth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the transmission is a little loud and a little clunky and all that stuff, but you're just going down the road. And then even the air conditioning system is kind of loud, but that's kind of standard for those cars.
Yeah.
But so it's got all these things going on here, but mostly it's the four-wheel drive system that you hear in the drivetrain moving back and forth or whatever. And you're always questioning, is this supposed to sound this way? And like, oh, let me borrow my friend's 959 to see if that's. No, you can't do that. So, I've never driven another one.
And then do you use, it's all, I've always seen the shift knob, obviously, and it's always been talked about the G gear, the low first gear that makes it a 6-speed. I guess the shift knob actually only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but the Galinda gear, or whatever they call it, the first gear is some sort of, do you ever use that, or do you start off in first, or how do you actually drive it?
Oh yeah, no. So I use G all the time as first gear, and it's funny that one of your guys on your Bring a Trailer site here has told me that the reason why I didn't know this. The reason why that is there is because 6-speed transmissions were illegal in Germany. That sounds improbable, but everything's slightly weird in Germany sometimes. So, okay, sure. No 6-speed. I don't know. I have no idea why that would be. I'm sure they have some sort of reasoning. I can't think of a funny joke to go along with it, but so it is first gear. It's not this off-roading thing. It's something weird. I'm like, why do they call this G? Because you really don't want to go off in second, because it's a pretty high gear. I can get 60 in first maybe, or 55 in first. I don't know. I can go really far in first. So it's not like it's a super short off-roading. I got a 4-wheel drive fire truck, and I got a 4-wheel drive tank, and those have low gears. You run it full RPM, and the thing is crawling at a pace that you could like get on your hands and knees and crawl along with the car at. That's not this. This is a full first gear. So
yeah, okay, interesting. I've always seen that. I've never heard the legal claim being made that six speeds weren't allowed. I guess this was 86, 87. Like trying to think of other 6-speed cars that may have been out and about. I don't know if there were any that really took over maybe a little bit later. So could be, but anyway, yep. I've always been fascinated by the low gear, and if anybody uses it, or if it's it sounds like it's just a renaming according to the way you drive it.
Well, so. we read about it on the internet, and everything on the internet is true. So remember that. Yeah. I always like to verify everything I hear. There's lots of stuff that people say, oh yeah, isn't that? I'm like, oh, okay. All right, let me check that. That's what Google was meant for, right?
Yeah.
To settle bar bets and questions about obscure 1980s supercars.
There you go. Well, it's awesome to talk about the 959, and obviously seeing your comments there have been super cool. That made me look at your profile. You joined BAT way back in 2018, and you're I don't know if you want this public or not. Like the crazy stuff you've been bidding on is public there. You may know that.
That's not crazy stuff.
I love it. And then you talk about your fire truck and your military. What is it, Ferret or something? You have some sort of interesting military vehicle you're driving around SoCal. We love crazy variety like that. So we don't just need to talk about the 959. I'd love to know a little bit about your other stuff that you're passionate about, or vehicles that you have or want to have. I see you. You've been bidding on some A110 rally cars here and there. You've been bidding on some International Harvester trucks. You're just kind of all over.
Bid on that, really?
I love it.
Did I really bid on that one? Oh man, Glad I didn't win that one. That's like what, 38 feet long or something. God, where would I put that?
Yeah.
I really bid on that? Okay. I think my wife said no on that one. I'm pretty sure that would be an instant veto. So
But what puts all this together from you? Where does all this excitement come from? Obviously, the business you built was really heavy on Porsche and BMW, and Mercedes sprinkled in there as well. But yeah, tell us a little bit about the kind of stuff that when you walk out to the collection, the thing you want to actually drive or stare at the longest, or the kind of variety that gets you excited about this stuff.
I got a collage of printouts on the wall of the most interesting cars that I have. I don't know if you can see that, but that I'm looking at right now. But I like interesting and weird stuff that is cool. I mean, I like Jay Leno a lot. He's a nice guy, but he's really weird with his steam engines and stuff like that. I mean, I like to think I'm cool weird. The exciting things I got in the last few years, I got the Adams Probe 16 is the most unusual car I have. That was the car that was used in a Clockwork Orange that Malcolm McDowell was driving around killing everyone with. It's kind of a dark story behind it, but we just got that from back from the Peterson that was on display there. I got a 1948 Formula. It's not Formula. It's a Fiat 500 Mini. Like it looks like an old Formula One race car that's legal for the street. So we drive that around. My wife thinks I'm going to get killed in that one. It's just a little bit bigger than a motorcycle.
Okay.
We got a 190 SL Mercedes that we customized and built into a speedster and a roadster. I gotta say, I like this car. I think it's pretty cool. I took it to Monterey a few months ago for the historics, and everybody was looking at it. I could not believe it. It was like I was Bruno Mars driving this thing. There's like a group of 6 Asian kids with all their phones out taking pictures of me and my buddy Scott in the car. And I'm like, no, we're not that cool. Seriously, guys, you need to. We don't have Bitcoin. It's okay. Don't take a picture of us. Anyway, but the most exciting stuff we have is the Porsche race cars that we started collecting. I started collecting about 10 years ago. So, I figured I wanted to buy a car. Again, asked the wife. And I was looking at a 934. She's like, like that night before I was going to wire the money, I showed her the picture. She's like, don't you already have like 4 of those? I'm like, but it's a 934. She's like, what? Okay, all right. I do listen to her. So I said, maybe I should branch out, not just so. Anyway, so I decided to buy a 962 from Europe. There's a whole story with that one. And then I bought another one, planning to sell the original one because I'm trying to upgrade the car, because that's what I do all the time. I buy a better car. I say, I'll just sell the old one. But I don't sell anything. So I end up with I'll get around to that later on, and then I never do it. And then the third one, which is an interesting story. I mean, if you want me to tell the story?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are all 962s, and I've been wondering, and certainly want to ask you, like, what the heck what do you do with these things? Are you a racer? Do you want to go drive them, or is this more a collecting sort of passion? I mean, those cars take some doing to go get out on the track. I know it's not.
No,
it's not just
I'm a collector more than anything else. I'm not even really that terribly good of a driver. So people think that, why don't you come do the celebrity race Long Beach? I'm like, no, you don't want me there. No. I'm not driving with anybody else, because it's everybody thinks I'm like this great driver, and I just nod and pretend. I'm like, okay, but no, I can drive. I'm not a terrible driver, but I'm not like these other guys. So, but no, I have one that we drive on the track occasionally, and it's a great car. It's very forgiving. So, we drove it all day long. The first time I drove it, I was driving around all day long. And then at the end of the day, you get tired. You make a mistake. I looked over, and bird flying by or something like that, and I'm like, there's a corner coming up. So I slammed on the brakes, and the car went like this. It's like the car said, "This is the first time you've actually really used the brakes all day, Wayne. Come on." So I could see the car stopped on a dime, and I'm like, I didn't realize it could do that. So,
but anyway, these cars, so I mean, I don't know these cars by their serial number and which one's the Daytona car versus the Le Mans car and all that sort of stuff. I kind of go by the paint scheme. It's like, I know there's the High Life car, there's the different Rothmans versions, there's Yokohama livery cars. There's Leighton House. There's all these different ones floating around, and that's obviously a terrible way to identify a car because it can be painted in 36 hours or whatever into a different one. But tell folks a little bit about which ones you have, maybe what they look like, and then maybe which one that is that sees track time, or which one's the third one with the crazy story.
Sure. So the first one I bought was the Yokohama car. It's unrestored, which a lot of people like, which means that it looks like it just came off the racetrack. That's the one that I drive, everywhere. It's, in fact, we took it to a Concours and I loaded it off the trailer. It was a Concours down here in PV, and I had to park a ways away, so I had to drive this thing on the street. And I had just gotten it. I'd never driven it before. And the steering wheel and everything is on the right-hand side. Anyway, the Concours gets done, and I'm driving this thing up the street, and there's a Little League game getting out, all right? And there's tons of people and tons of traffic, and I'm driving up a hill, and I'm driving a 962, and this is a 962. It overheats if you sit, for any amount of time without it moving. So it's not like a regular car. So I'm sitting there so I'm like, okay. I'm like, I think I can squeeze through there. So I squeeze through this narrow gap to get back to my trailer, and I park the car and I get out of the car. And all of a sudden, this lady comes up and starts yelling at me in Spanish. And I'm like, I can't, I don't speak Spanish, so I can't do it good. Anyway, she started yelling at me. She's like, you hit my car, blah, blah. I'm like, what? Turns out the car was so wide, I scraped an Escalade going by with my 962. And it's okay. My car, it was just another scratch on it because it's unrestored and it looks like it just came out of Le Mans. So anyway, and I'm like, she's like, I need your insurance information. And I'm like, this is a race. I just came back from the Concours. She's like, I don't have street insurance on this car. She's like, and then she starts lecturing me about driving a car on the street without having insurance. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't really argue because I was there. I was like, yeah. So then her husband or boyfriend or the dad, came over, and I'm like, dude, this car show. It's like, I'll pay for your car. I said, here's my card. Take it to the body shop. I'll pay to have it repainted and all that stuff. That scrape was actually buffed out of my car. I just used some turtle compound or whatever, buffed right out. But that car is unrestored, so it doesn't. It just blends right in with all the other scrapes that are on it. It's got literally white duct tape covering gashes in the tail where something happened to it and all that stuff. That's some people love that car because it's got the battle scar still on it. So
and then the second one, what you said you upgraded to get a kind of a nicer one. What was the second one?
Yeah. So the Jägermeister car, the second one that I bought is it's the first carbon fiber 962. And this was the first race that this thing ever raced at was completely wrecked. Because it's a carbon fiber tub, the guy who was driving it, I forget, I think it was Fitzpatrick Racing. They just got out of the car and walked away. No damage whatsoever. Even the tub wasn't there. Every other part of the car was completely destroyed. But the actual chassis in the tub was there. Very, very strong. It's the one that you want to take out if you're not a good driver and you think you might smack it into a wall, because you will most likely survive on that. That's what I tell everyone. If I ever sell that car, that will be the marketing ploy for that. I just show them the picture of the crash. Some people like that, some people don't like that. So yeah.
Cool. And then it's expanded beyond. You said there's more in the race car portfolio, or what's
we have 6.5 of them.
Oh wow, man, that's incredible. Out of, I'm sure all the numbers and such, but that's a meaningful chunk of how many of these were done. But I know they went through a lot of them in racing. Yeah.
Well, we've restored them too. So, but the third one is the most interesting story, and I've not told this story publicly. So I told it in small party gatherings where the innocent and the guilty and the stupid can be kept safe from ridicule. So let's see. Yeah, this is a good story. So I was at Monterey. This is back in 2010. And I think enough years have passed now so that I won't be booted out of Monterey or anything like that, or get any bad publicity, and et cetera, et cetera. And, I finally did fess up and tell David Swig this story. But so I was at Monterey, the Historics one year, and we were at the Bonhams auction. And Bonhams had 3 962s up for sale that year. There were two RLR cars, and then this Haviland Sebring winner was coming up on the Friday auction. And there was a Thursday, Friday auction. And the first two 962s, one of them was a project car. And that's what I did. That's what we do. And I was restoring cars and all that stuff or whatever. That car all of itself is another whole story. But I was there on Thursday bidding on one of those 962 project cars. So I'm standing in the back of the room bidding, and Malcolm, the auctioneer at Bonham's, knows me, sees me bidding, all that stuff, whatever. The cars reserved were way too high. They didn't sell, but that's lots of auction tricks, so you bid and then you see if you can make a deal afterwards, but they weren't really moving on that yet. I did end up owning that car later on after they tried to sell it at 3 more other auctions, but that's not the story. It's not about that. That car is not in this story. So I left. And I called my wife. I literally called my wife on the way home. And I said, honey, you'd be so proud of me. I was at the auction and I was bidding, but I didn't go crazy and I didn't buy anything and all that stuff. And it's all good now. So, we're I told you, that I'm in control. So, my gambling / auction habit problem is under control. No therapy needed. So anyway, the next morning I went out and I was staying at my cousin's house. So she lives around the corner from there. So the next day I got out, got in my car, drove over to Concorso Italiano, hung out there for a little while, saw all the Ferraris or whatever. And then I came, I said, I wonder if that Haviland car is up on the block, because the guy who owned it was a friend of mine, Jerry. And I was like, okay, Concorso, Ferrari, seen them all. So, I drove over there, I'm driving, back to the auction, and I get there, and this is the Friday auction at Bonham's. Kind of corresponds with the Quail event, and my friend Jerry is there, and the car hasn't gone up yet, and he's just freaking out. He's like, oh my God, there's nobody here. This car's not allowed. He's like, I said, I don't think it's gonna. I brought it all. He said, I need to sell this car. I said, like, I've got debts to pay. I need to sell the car. I dragged it here from Florida. I'm not sure what's gonna happen. I need to sell this car. And his girlfriend, and this guy he's a funny guy. He's like 60, 65. He's an oncologist. He's got a good sense of humor. And it's like, he's just panicking at this point. So got all the silver hair and all that, but he's, and I've been friends with him for a while because we're 962 guys. So I said, and then we're sitting there watching, and, I'm just watching there with him, and he's freaking out. And a Duesenberg goes up, I don't know anything about Duesenbergs now and then, didn't I? But I know they're expensive. So Duesenberg comes up, and Malcolm, the auctioneer, comes up. He's like, "Oh, I hear any bidding for anybody? 750, anything, anyway, 6, 5, 4." Yeah. Finally, the bidding starts at 300 grand, and I didn't know anything about auctions back then. I didn't know all the rules, all the stuff about reserves and no reserves and whatever, et cetera, et cetera. So we watched the Duesenberg and didn't get any traction whatsoever. And so Jerry's just flipping out right now. He's like, and I said to him, I turned to him, these are important lessons in life. I turned to him, I said, don't worry, Jerry, I got your back. I'll make sure that your car does not sit on the block without any action. Bidding on the 962s yesterday, we'll get some action moving on your car. So he's like, okay, well, I was like, what is the reserve? He said, the reserve is 800. And he said, the way auction companies sometimes work is that they take the owner of the car and they sit him in the front row, and they have one of the auction, especially in a car like this. This was on the car that's in the magazines. It's on the front cover of the book and all that stuff. This is a star car. So they're going to put Jerry in the front row, and they're going to put someone next to him. I'm not going to mention names, but someone next to it. And that person's responsibility is to poke them, if the car doesn't meet reserve, and to get them to lower the reserve. This is standard auction procedure. So anyway, so Jerry said, the car is going to be at, the reserve is 800, not a penny lower. If they ask me to lower the reserve, I'm going to, and then he made an obscene gesture. Tell him to go screw off. So I'm like, okay, all right, sounds good. I got it, Jerry, no problem. All right, happy to help. Yeah. So anyway, so the car comes in. Duesenberg has just gone by. The car comes up on the line. I go into the back of the room where I always stand when I'm bidding on a car. I always like to see what's going on in front of me, because you're in the front, you can't stand it. So I'm in the back. The car comes up on the stage, and they have a video, and the car, they rev it all over the place, whatever. They make a big show of it. They have big music going on in the background, rap music like Van Halen. They're making a big, huge freaking deal on this thing and whatever. And then Malcolm says, okay, who will start the bidding up? 500 grand. So I raise my hand. I was like, 500 grand. I'm like, 800, that's the reserve. By the way, I don't have 800 grand either at all. Nothing. I got nothing. So I'm like, okay, the reserve. So the bidding goes on 500, and it goes, and then 650, 507, finally goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I don't know who's bidding against me. I can't see anything, but even though I'm in the back. So anyway, so it gets to, and forgive me, my numbers might be off because it's just 10 years ago. It gets to $720,000. And Malcolm's staring at me in the back of the room. And I got my arms crossed, and I'm like, no. And Malcolm's like, I hear 750. I need 750. And he's pointing at 750, 750, 750, 750, 750, 750. And he says, 740, 730. And he said, 10. Give me 10. I'm looking for 10. Because, sometimes auctioneers kind of milk the process and all that. 10.
I'm familiar. I'm familiar with the process. Yeah.
But they also play different tricks on you too. So if you raise they say, give me 10, give me 10, they raise your hand, and they could say, okay, 750 for him in the back. No, that wasn't. So I raised my hands up. I know you guys can't see it, but I raised my hands up with 10 fingers, and I pointed Malcolm at 10 fingers like that. And so he goes, so then he goes, 730. Selling the car today for $730,000. I'm like, what? I'm like, where's that guy's bidding against me? What? I'm looking over. He goes, it's going once, going twice. Sold. I'm like, what? I'm like, what the? No. And he's like, what's your number? And I'm like, number 300 and screwed 36. So I'm in shock at this point. I just bought a car I know nothing about. I paid a lot of money for it that I don't have. And I'm just in a shock. I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, and Jerry said so Jerry comes up, and I look at him, and he looks at me, he says, I don't know what happened. And I said, they sold his car. I'm like, yeah. I was like, and he said to me, he said, do you know who bought it? I said, yes. I said, I bought it. I said, why did you lower the reserve? You told me you weren't going to lower the reserve. And he said, I didn't lower the reserve. Why did you lower the reserve? I didn't lower the reserve. Why did you lower the reserve? I didn't lower the reserve. We're shouting at each other in the back of this office, and we're making a commotion and all this stuff in the back. I'm like, let's take this outside because we're making a commotion. So we go outside, and I'm like outside behind the office, like, why did you lower the reserve? I didn't lower the reserve. Why did you lower the reserve? I didn't lower the reserve. And like, what the hell happened? Turns out, again, this is 10 years ago when I was a lot dumber than I am now. I'm still dumb, but not as dumb as I was back then. Turns out there's a 10% auctioneer's fee that goes on top of I knew that, but I wasn't doing the math in my head. So what auction companies have to do when they have cars advertised in sports car market and advertised in car and driver, they had this car there advertised. Auction companies make money selling cars. If they don't sell the car, they don't make money, don't get new. So anyway, they had to sell the car. So what they did is they took all their commission, the total price of the car would have been 808 with the 10%. So they sold the car for 800, and they only took eight grand of the commission on that. So they cut their commission down in order to get the car sold. And we figured that out in the back there. So then Jerry's like, oh my gosh, we gotta go tell him this. Like, no, we can't tell him. I'm legally obligated to buy the car. So I called back home to the office at Pelican. I'm like, I called the accountant. I'm like, how much is in our credit line? And how much is in our bank account at Pelican? Can we swing this? I'm like, I have no choice really. So we called the bank and pulled down all my credit line, pulled down the checking account. Oh, we can just pay some suppliers a little late. We don't. So then I called my friend Scott. He's my employee and friend Scott, who's the Porsche race car expert. And I told him the story, and he just laughed his ass off at me. So I couldn't even speak on the phone. And then he's like, let me see. He's like, let me see what you bought. All right. Okay, let's look. All right, let's see what Wayne bought accidentally. Oh, one Sebring in 87. One Sebring in 88. looks like you accidentally bought a good car. Oh God.
And
So
do you still have that one?
I still have it, but that's not the end of the story.
Oh
So,
man.
so we go on. So the first thing I did is, oh my gosh. I had to make sure I paid for the car, and Jerry helped me out. He gave me some money back on the car. He felt really bad, but because I was just helping him out on the car, and I didn't really want this car, and I was basically, not bankrupt at this point, but I had zero cash. After that, I had to take every penny out of everything and borrow the rest. And I actually did put some of it on a credit card. So, Clark recommends not using credit cards for anything, especially not buying vintage race cars. No. So anyway, so I'm like, oh my God. And then like somebody remind me, what the hell are you going to tell your wife? I'm like, that's okay. So anyway, so I had to go to the Chase Bank, get the car paid for, and then I had to get it insured because 1 month before, Barrett Jackson had a tent fall down on all their cars, and there was a big lawsuits and all that stuff or whatever. So I'm like, I'm gonna get this thing insured. Then I had to get it shipped, so I arranged a shipment. Blah 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 blah. So, and then I went back to my cousin's house and I had a drink, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I gonna tell my wife? So I called a lot of people because that was a big question about what do you tell your wife. And some people said, oh, don't tell her at all. Some people said, oh, you have to be completely honest with her. And then one guy said, well, you already own 2 of them. This is the 3rd one. So just make sure all 3 are not in the same place at any time, and she won't know the difference. That's probably accurate, but I don't really think I could pull that off. So anyway, so we had the car shipped back to LA, and my wife called me. The car actually beat me back because I think I drove or flew, or I think I drove back. Car back beat me back. Anyway, they dropped it off at Pelican, and I'm literally pushing it into the warehouse. And my wife called me. She's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I literally have the phone in my ear, like pushing the car. Like, nothing, nothing, dear. I'm just finishing up something at work, and I'll be home soon. And so. And this is all the money we had, by the way, too. All that house money I talked about with the 959 before, that was all now gone into this car, too. So at least I had some street cred for the 959, although I never sold it. So she always said, how much is it worth? Never. She's one of those ladies that likes cash in the bank and all that stuff, because that's, most women are kind of like that, where they don't believe that cars, because the 959 looks just like a Yugo to her. So it doesn't really have a distinction. But anyway, so I get back. I'm like, how am I going to do this? So we get back, and I take my wife out to dinner. Okay, trying hard, So we go to Terranea, which is a nice resort place by our house or whatever. And we sit down, and I get her a margarita. Good strategy. and then my cousin, who was getting a divorce at the time, her husband was doing some really nasty things and all that stuff or whatever. So I started talking about him. Oh, Jeff did this, Jeff did that, Jeff did this, Jeff did that. Oh, he's just bad. I'm like trying to make him look really, really bad, so I look okay. And then she's like, oh, well, tell me about your cousin's new boyfriend. And I'm like, well, before we do that, I've got something to tell you. And she's like, what? And I'm like, I kind of made a mistake. I kind of made it's not a small mistake. It's not a humongous mistake. It's a medium-sized mistake. And she's like, what is it? So, okay. So I'm at the auction, and with Jerry, I start telling a story. I'm like, and the Duesenberg is coming across, and the Duesenberg's $1 million. And she said, the Duesenberg's not important. How much? And I'm like, no, it's important. So the Duesenberg was going across the stage, and she said, how much? And I said, $800,000. And she's like, oh my God. I was like, oh my God. I said, are we bankrupt? And I'm like, no, we're not bankrupt. Not bankrupt at all. You know how some people buy a house that they can't afford, and then they don't have any furniture in the house? And then you call them house poor? We're what they call car poor. So we have this car and can not afford anything else. So, but and then I said something, and I did not plan this. And this is my advice to all husbands out there. You only get to use this once, by the way. I said to her, you know what, honey? I made a mistake. And I said, you know what upsets me more than anything else is the fact that you trust me with our money and our finances, and I let you down. And then she started to cry. And I thought, I did not see that coming. And after that, I was like, oh, okay. I think I might have skated out of this without sleeping on the couch or something like that.
But then that was your third 956, and now you said you have 6.5. So there's that novel goes onward. But probably didn't buy another one at a bottoms auction again after that.
As much as I'd like to say that story is over, there's another point to it. So Bruce Levin, who was the driver and the owner of that car, I was talking to him at Porsche Rennsport a month after I bought the car. And I told him I bought his car. And he said, yeah. I was like, he said that car went for really, really low. They were telling me it was going to go for much higher. I would have been on it. And I'm like, well, you can still buy it if you like. So he offered me more than I paid for it. So I went back to my wife and I said, good news. I can sell the car tomorrow to Bruce Levin. And she's like, well, maybe you shouldn't sell. And after she said that, I was like, oh, okay, I'm off the hook completely, because she's not like dying for me to sell it.
And which one? That was number 3 for you. But which car was that? What was the aesthetic?
That's the Texaco Haviland car. That one won Sebring in 87. It won Sebring in 88. And it won 5 other races in 87. And it's a really, really good car. Bruce Levin, I talked to him at length about the car. He said that thing just was dialed in. They never had any problems. It never slipped, never went into a wall. Everybody loved it. It just performed, never had any real issues with it. It was just had such good car. Some cars are cursed, they go out on the first lap and they go off the road. I have a car that literally landed in the water. They had to dish it out of the water in Florida. It went underwater. There's a picture of a sign on Tony Callis's office asking him to come out there and fix their $5 million boat anchor, is what they used to call it. This is the Lola. I mean, some cars have bad karma. This Sebring car had a lot of good karma. So that's the story, and that is now a public story. So it's been 10 years. So I don't think they're gonna yell at me or anything like that for that. But
well, you bid on it and you paid for it, and off it goes. I think there's a fair number of interesting handshake agreements going on between bidders in some of those tents. You never really know what's going on. But anyway, it's good to get some insider info, and awesome to get some insider info on just owning those cars and having those cars. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing before we wrap up here with Dempsey Motorsports, and what you're doing with these cars now. You said you're restoring the 956s, or you're restoring other stuff?
Yeah, we just find projects as they are. As I say, it's hard to sell stuff. I sold one car in the last 3 years, and that was the 108B. There's another whole story on that one, but I don't think we have time. We bought that one that was the car that was on auction on Thursday. So we identified that car had actually won the Norris Ring race and won Kailami in 87, and then we restored that and sold it. It's the only car I've ever sold in the last several years.
Another 962 or 956?
Yeah, that's a 962.
Another 962. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So the reason why we have 6.5 cars is that the latest project we're doing is really, really cool. It's we found the body work and the body for the prototype Dower 962 streetcar that held the world's record for the world's fastest streetcar for 13 years. Not too many people know about this. The Guinness Book of World Records did not recognize the car as being the fastest in the world because it's based on a actual 962 race chassis. So it's a race car converted for the street, whereas the McLaren F1 that actually is in the record books was developed specifically for the street. But this car, our car, was faster. So found the bodywork for that. And it's been kicking around for a while. We have a lot of 962 parts that we bought, 6-7 years ago. And it gives us the ability to take on crazy projects that no one else would take on, because we can put this stuff back together. Most other people can't. And the guy who had this project was trying to put it together, and he just didn't have the parts or the knowledge or anything like that, or the experience. I've got a really good guy, Trevor Crisp from Katana in the UK, who's got a whole crew puts these things together. But anyway, so the Dower car, we have the body work. Instead of using an original engine and transmission, because those are really, really hard to find, we're actually doing a Singer style upgrade. We're putting a Porsche factory GT1 drivetrain in that car. So with a sequential transmission, the purist guys, you can't do that. No, but it's a worthwhile upgrade. If I was putting the four-cylinder Volkswagen 914 engine in, yeah, I would be banished, and you wouldn't be talking to me right now. But no, we're putting Porsche 1,000 horsepower GT1 engine that came out of the, you can't see the poster on the wall, but it's right there. It came out of the 1998, the second series of the GT1. So that and another 962 race chassis that we have. So that will be done in maybe a year or two, and it'll be awesome. So they only made.
And what are you going to do with that? You're going to display it, or you're going to
sure.
take it somewhere?
I'm going to put my all my kids are no longer child seats, and we're going to take it to Cars and Coffee and go get ice cream with it, and I'll go. My wife says go get some milk and some cream and all that, and I'll do that. So no, it'll be fun. It'll be good. Yeah, no, it's going to be an awesome car. Very unique. Again, it fits the whole story of that. So, and it's a 962 for the street, and it'll have 1,000 horsepower, and it'll be awesome. They only made 6 production cars. 5 of them are on not on display, but in the Sultan of Brunei's collection, just sort of melting out there in the jungle. One of them is in Sweden. And then there's 2 other prototype bodies. We have the original prototype body that was the first one displayed at the 1993 IAA show in Germany. And then a guy named Mike Stepena is doing a restoration on a second one in Pennsylvania. So I'm very excited about that. It's pretty cool.
Very cool. Well, we'd love to see updates or pictures on that, the picture galleries that you posted on the Black 959. It's still a Pelican link. You must still have some love and ties into Pelican, because that thing, you posted a Pelican link for those, which I thought was interesting. But anyway, fantastic stuff. Awesome stories. We'd love to have you back on at some point. Sounds like there's more stories, man. These 956s, we can talk forever and ever about, those cars, where they've been, where they've raced, what lake they ended up in, what finish line, what podium. But super impressive that you've ended up with all those cars, and congratulations on that. Thanks so much for your comments in the red 959 that is ending on BAT, which is an interesting one, and just your enthusiasm comes through, and I'm really glad that we could connect and that you could be part of the BAT community.
Sure. Well, thank you guys for having me on. Sounds great.
No problem. We'll meet up again soon. Thank you, Wayne, and thanks everybody for listening. Catch us on the next BAT podcast.